So first of all, thank you so much for Kandji for hosting us, feeding us, watering us, all that jazz. Second time we've been here in I think almost 12 months now, like just over. But great host as always. Got a nice little session, local sessions for you folks today. So I'm not going to rabbit on too much. So first of all, and there'll be a bit of faffing in between, apologies for that. We've got Arek and Weldon talking about Declarative Device Management and the future of Apple device management. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so we only have 15 minutes, but I'm Weldon Dodd. I'm from Kandji. I'm Arek Dreyer from Kandji. Yeah. And what we're going to share with you is a presentation that we delivered at the Apple IT Tech Camps over the summer at some of those Apple events, and just an overview of DDM and how it works, particularly with, or specifically with, software update. Okay, so my clicker was working and now has stopped. I really don't want to stand here. Okay, let's just we'll get through the best we can. So just an overview of DDM first. How OS updates work the old way, how they're going to work the new way, and we'll talk a little bit about what's next. So for DDM recap, right? Declarative device management includes a few different features. So one is a declaration. You can think of that as like a config profile today, that the specific settings or controls that you're trying to deliver to the device. Those are accompanied by activations and predicates. So you can make that configuration dependent on a particular state of the device. So you could set a predicate, which is like a rule saying that, if the device is on macOS 14.0, then activate this configuration. You can also deliver assets alongside of those configurations. So think of something like a certificate. Another use case is a user profile image. It's a reusable asset that can be referenced independent of the configuration. So if you think about the way it is today, if you're going to deliver like a Wi-Fi profile that requires a certificate, both of those payloads have to be in the same profile in order for it to work. And you would have to send multiple instances of that certificate to a device if it's used in multiple contexts. Now you can deliver that certificate once and reference it from multiple configurations. So it's some efficiency gains and a better architectural design for delivering these items. There's a new status report, a status channel, so the device can report back to us the state of a request that we've made. That's in contrast to the existing setup where we issue a command very politely and hope that the device is going to implement that command. And in order to find out if the command has been implemented, we ask over and over and over again, have you done the thing yet? What, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Now we can just open the status channel and wait for the device to tell us what's going on. So it's switching from a polling model where the server is continually asking the device instead to a push model where the device can push the information to us or the updates back to us as they happen. It's more extensible. It's the architecture is a little bit better. Some of the things have to change. Okay. So, I forgot my clicker. Doesn't work. Some other big picture items to be aware of. A lot of the logic is moving from the server to the device because we can deliver this configuration to the device saying, hey, we want it to be in this state or to have this setting applied. The device then takes control over enforcing that setting and making sure it stays that way. If the device drifts out of that desired state, it's up to the local DDM agent to bring the device back into that state. So this is more efficient. It means less compute on our side, on the MDM side, but it also means it can work offline. So for instance, if you make an activation dependent on the device having File Vault enabled, for example, like you only want that trust certificate to be available if File Vault is turned on. If the device goes offline and the user disables File Vault, the device can revoke that access to the trust certificate automatically. It doesn't need to talk to the server and tell it, hey, File Vault's off, or wait for the server to ask, is File Vault still on? And then send a command. All that can happen locally and independent of the server. So DDM is implemented alongside of MDM. So these are things that are not a problem, but just worth pointing out. Thank you to Apple for not making this a problem for us, as that DDM does not require re-enrollment. So you can take your existing devices that are already enrolled in MDM, you send a command to them to turn on DDM, and now that all this DDM functionality is available to you. So that's great from a practitioner standpoint. No one wants to unenroll and re-enroll their devices. The capabilities are being added. We saw some early support in iOS. Now it's being expanded to macOS. The number of items and controls that are available in DDM keep growing. We're, no one's telling us anything, right? We don't know any secrets. We don't know any more than you do, but we're very optimistic about the opportunity for Apple to continue to expand DDM. Well, I won't speculate further. You can still support legacy profiles, so they just get delivered alongside DDM. They work the way they've always worked. Should be good. So just to illustrate this point, like this is a log from Kandji. I've been warned about the air horn. I'm not selling anything. I'm just showing you the interface. But you can see in the log here, there's a moment in time where we send the command to the device to activate DDM. Now that that's completed, declarative management is available. Okay. We started with the passcode declaration. So this is the first DDM profile or configuration that we could deliver. It is similar functionality to, it's intended to be the same functionalities of what's available in MDM with the passcode configuration profile. There's no extra controls, checkbox, radio controls, radio buttons, anything here to distinguish one from the other. You just, in Kandji, you define your policy, it gets delivered to the device via config profile if it's on an earlier version of iOS, or it gets delivered as a DDM declaration if it's on a version of iOS that supports that. Okay. Now, just some things to point out is this is an example of what it looks like from the end user standpoint. Okay. The one thing I'll say just here in the middle as a sort of caution is that the DDM implementation of these controls like passcode, it is a brand new implementation of that control. So it has similar functionality. The end result should be the same, but it is a new implementation. And that means that it comes with some cool new functionality that I've talked about. It also potentially comes with some new issues, right? That we've had the pleasure of working with our friends at Apple on sorting out, right? Things are in a good state with passcode policies today. But there were some issues with there's some issues. Parity between iOS and macOS, and parity between the old implementation and the new implementation. So those things got sorted out, but just as a bit of a caution and advice that as you're working through implementing some of these new features, just make sure to do an extra bit of scrutiny, an extra bit of testing with those to make sure that you're getting the expected results that you had on the previous implementation, right? Because the new method is a new implementation, right? So you're going to want to look at it carefully. Okay, so I'll let Arek talk about the old way, and then hopefully we'll still have time for the new way.
So the whole reason for software update, why you as admins care, is because you want to keep devices up to date. You want to have the ability to defer updates. You want to enforce updates at a certain time. Like, I want to make sure these updates and upgrades are installed. You don't want to disrupt user productivity. You want your users to be able to use their Apple devices to do their work, which is why they have them in the first place. Notify and update users about the updates, and then verify that the updates are applied. So I'm going to walk you through the old way of, well, if you just hit the slides, right? Yep. So the old way is we say, well, what OS version? And we have to wait for the reply. And then we say, okay, well, go ahead and install. And the device says, okay, And we say, are you done yet? And the device says, nope, not done yet, still working on it. Are you done yet? If an error occurs, which sometimes happens with software update, we rely on the device telling us that it failed. All right, so then we say, okay, well, try again. And it tries again. And finally, so we say, are you done yet? And it says, yeah, I'm done. We've installed. So that's the old way. It's a lot of back and forth between the server and the client, and it's painful. So there's got to be a better way. So, Weldon, back to you on.
Yeah, sure. So, to work around this, all the vendors have come up with different enhancements, right? We have ours, trying to create a good user experience around this. When to start the update, giving the user some idea of progress, all that kind of information. And we, I'll position it this way. Like at Kandji, we're quite proud of the experience that we created around this and being able to add some additional context for the user and try to create a better experience. But that was stuff that we had to add because it wasn't available sort of natively to inform the user about what was going on. A lot of stuff was happening behind the scenes that was invisible to the end user. And so we built some additional tooling to expose that and just present more information. But that's great, right? But this is an example of the kind of experience that we created. But that's work that we have to do. It's additional software that we have to test. It's other things in the chain that just make it more complex. So last year, a year and a bit ago, right? We heard
2 years ago, right?
a year and a half,
Yeah.
whatever. In 2022, right? We heard that the future of the protocol is DDM.
Will be.
Yeah, it will be. Sorry, I blew the punchline there. This year, we heard that DDM is the future of the protocol. So we want to look at what's going to come up next and how this is going to work going forward. So the new way is that we deliver a configuration to the device that says we want this. Well, one, we need to enable it, but then we want this specific version of macOS to be enforced by this date and time. Okay. We subscribe to the status channel. The device then sends us the status back, and it can provide, this information here, that what pending version there is, what the current install state is, et cetera. So the configuration has the details in it with OS version, build number, and the enforcement date and time. One interesting little detail is that this time is, again, I mentioned a lot of the logic is moving to the client. So this time is interpreted locally on each device. So if you specify it to happen at 5 p.m. on a Friday, right, it'll be 5 p.m. local time for each device instead of globally for whatever the server thinks is 5 p.m. UTC or something. Okay, so if we have a failed status, some kind of failure reason, which we probably won't see with this new version of software update, right? It'll probably be a thing in the past, but it could return that information to us through the status channel. So again, it's pushing the state to us instead of us polling over and over again, waiting for that. In a success, okay, again, the device just pushes that success status to us. So now we know that it's done and ready to go. Now, the big change is going to be on the user experience. So before, when you sent the MDM command to install ASAP or install a software update, right, it would just start happening without much notification to the user unless that was provided by the vendor. So the difference now is that when you use the declaration for software update, it's going to trigger the exact same process of approving the updates or getting notified about the updates that the user has experienced if they went to system settings and click software update. The notifications are native, they're part of the system, they're going to look familiar. We're very optimistic about this, that it's going to improve user trust in that process. And so if you do need to involve the user, or if you choose to involve the user, right, it's going to look very familiar to them and they'll feel comfortable with proceeding. Now, you still have the ability to enforce a deadline and say like, hey, look, I really don't care about the user's feelings at this point. I just want to make sure that macOS is updated by this time so I can tell my boss that everyone's off the old version and they're current. It could still do that and enforce that deadline for you, but the user is going to have a more native experience with the notifications and things that come up. So it'll be a change for folks, but I think one that will be welcome. All the other stuff that we built around OS updates and managing those and notifying the user, right? Those aren't needed with DDM because now there's a native experience for that. The user will see native dialogues, native notifications, and that reduces the complexity of the whole solution. The number of moving parts goes down. It's less software to test, less software to write. So it's all good. Now, the things that we want to do that Arek mentioned in terms of what the goals are for software updates, well, those are still all covered by DDM. Okay, so we can get to the same result or a similar result. So what's next? I mean, a little bit from us, some advice. Okay, talk to your vendor. If you're a Kandji customer, come talk to us about what we're doing, right? Because we're going to release support for this in stages. We started with passcode and status updates. DDM is next for software update. But as Apple continues to release more capabilities in the DDM side of the protocol, right? Just talk to your vendor to understand what their schedule is for supporting those additional features, when they plan to do it, how they plan to do it, right? So there's, our choice has been to try to consolidate the experience. So like I mentioned with passcode, in Kandji, there's one place where you go and configure the passcode policy, and then it gets implemented in one of two ways, depending on which version of the operating system that you're on. I know some other vendors have chosen to implement them as two different passcode policies, right? And you go into each one. So just understand like what their approach is and how, so that you're ready and prepared for implementing them when it's time. And then the last point here, I've already kind of touched on, right? The first time that we're going to see DDM updates for macOS is with 14.1. So that's still yet in the future. I'm speaking a little bit out of school here, but I'm just going to tell you, like, we're likely to hold back our support for DDM software update until after 14.1, because we want the chance to test it internally before we unleash it on our customers, right? We would rather be confident that we understand how it works and we've seen it work in production and in the field, and instead of letting our customers kind of beta test that for us. But it is important for you to participate in the macOS beta updates. Use the feedback assistant, use Appleseed and the feedback there to go through this and understand it. We're going to be watching very closely. I know all of our colleagues in the MDM industry are going to be watching this very closely. I know the folks at Apple are going to be watching this very closely to understand, what customers are actually seeing in the field as we go through this first round of using DDM for software update. Okay. I've got a list of resources here. I'll leave this up for a moment, and hopefully, if you don't feel like you have to write all this down, you can capture it off the live stream recording, or we'll post it to the London Apple Admins channel to share with you. But just some additional resources about DDM and what it means. I'm flying for time, but let me just take a moment to thank you all for the opportunity to be here. It's great to come over and see a group of Mac admins. You are my people, right? I didn't spend much time on introductions, but I've been in and around Mac admins and Apple for 30 years, and as a professional, and before that as an enthusiast, right? And it warms my heart to see so many of you gathered together and working together to share information and help each other be better. And I hope that we were able to contribute a little bit towards that tonight. Thank you for allowing us some time to share with you.
Thank you.
Thank you much, Weldon and Arek. You're awesome, thank you. Right, so going to talk about the evolution of Apple MDM.
Guess you're gonna see my right foot marks, apparently.
Worse.
Could be mine, but. Right, hello everyone. So the last talk I gave was a Mac Admins down at Brighton a few months ago. Anyone there? We're all people, cool, a little bit of a woo. And I unintentionally started that talk by saying that I was going to do a retrospective of my company, Railsr, starting from 2002. We didn't exist in 2002. I of course spent 2020, but today we are going to be looking back as far as 2002, because I've been asked to do a bit of a retrospective of how do we get to where we are today in the world of MDM. So my name is Steele. I'm currently the director of Workplace Tech at Railsr, and I also have a blog, which promote more at the end. And I've worked with all of these MDMs. All right. I think the stream is frozen because my cursor is not there. Oh, that's fun. This might be very interesting. There we go. Right, and I have worked with all of these lovely MDMs in some capacity over the last 20 years. So I've gone from being a first line support, I've done third line, I've been a solutions architect, deployment engineer, I've managed a help desk and supported various contracts around all of these lovely MDMs. I've been a trainer, now I'm a customer and IT director. So basically every perspective you could have. So out of interest, in terms of how long you've been in the world of Mac admin, who's done 5 years by show of hands? I thought that might be 10 years, 20. Wow, okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Keep going.
25. Did MDM exist? 30 years. Fair play, fair play. But yeah, so last time we had a little bit about the future of MDM, so I'm going to talk a little bit about past. And yeah, really quick run through of maybe how I think we got here. So let's take it back 20 years. Macs looked a little bit like this. Who's used one of these beautiful machines? Okay, not too many. What did we do with these? Well, they sat in the back of classrooms. They sat in some broadcast and kind of media companies, a couple of music studios, and that was about it, honestly. Why? Well, they were kind of expensive at the time, and not much support in terms of software. So, everything running locally on the machine back in the day. But yeah, that software was mostly kind of available in Windows. No Internet Explorer, which was the only browser you could actually do any work in back in the day. I'm glad that's changed. And yeah, and IT departments generally really didn't like them, right? They were sat in the, like I said, at the back of the room, and no one really knew how to troubleshoot, or at least from my experience. And yeah, there was a little resource available online, and they were treated as, yeah, not the primary devices, put it that way. So this is how I saw the state of play about 20 years ago in terms of the Mac itself. So we've got local profiles, generally speaking, local hosted, local network hosted directory servers, so your LDAPs. All the software, like I said, run locally, minimal kind of business software available, sort of cut down versions of Microsoft Office and a few other bits. In terms of MDM capabilities, very, very little. Basically, you could sort of remotely run some terminal commands, and there's a little bit of reporting and whatnot available. And yeah, very few using kind of centralized management systems. And in terms of rolling them out, well, not great. You probably buy maybe 20 tops at the time. An engineer comes in and basically sits down, does work that a user would do, and then they just get left to be out of date within the next weeks and months. So one of my first rollouts was a 10 Mac rollout into a music room. Took me a couple of days. You created local accounts, bound them to 80 possibly if required, if that even worked at the time. Installed Logic from a CD, and yeah, that was about it. It was a fairly simple process, if lengthy, but yeah, lots of repetitive tasks and really just unscalable in terms of mass deployment. And then we fast forward 10 years, Macs and Apple devices in general start looking a little bit more like this. More software available on the Mac, more workflows that have been moved from sort of desktop to web browser at this point, and they're just much more commonplace in enterprise and education. So at this time, I was an MDM deployment engineer, and I was rolling out iMacs, MacBooks, and iPads and everything else into a variety of MDMs using a few of these tools here. So I'm guessing from that reaction that some of you might recognize a couple of these. So anyone want to tell me what that is? Device Studio, yeah, boom, fair enough. This one, okay, correct. That one literally says what it is, but anyone at the back, what's that one? Cool. So every deployment I did for OS X at the time, I would be using at least 2, almost certainly 3 of these tools to do so. So yeah, we create our sort of vanilla OS and throw it out there through Deploy Studio, netboot a room full of Macs, and yeah, it was better. It wasn't ideal, but yeah, we had MDMs more involved at this point. We had agents that could do better things. Is anyone still using Monkey, by the way, today? One person. I'm surprised. Is that 2? Quick quiz. Who originally created Monkey and open sourced it? Anyone? No. Yeah?
Disney.
Well, Walt Disney originally open sourced it, but yeah, yes.
He was dead at that point as well.
Studios, sorry.
That was weird.
Cool. So yeah, so essentially companies and individuals started creating their own tools that help out with this kind of mass deployment of Macs. So, you know, in kind of Walt Disney's case, yeah, they built a software management tool because that wasn't sort of available, or at least to the quality that they needed in other tools at the time. And then Apple started pushing things further forward. Do we know what this is? I'd never seen this before until I Googled it earlier, this icon. This is the APNS, hence the pushing joke. All sorts of services and extra functionality just sort of in and around the OS itself. So APNS have changed everything, as we know. Instead of waiting for Macs to check in to an MDM server, instead we can start pushing configuration profiles, software updates, wipes, etc., over the air. And then coupled with kind of the advent of volume purchase program and all sorts of other pieces, finally we're getting towards something we would recognize today as some kind of MDM and Apple experience. So yeah, 10 years ago, the kind of dreaded mobile profiles were a thing. Still are. Local networking hosted and held out to AD, becoming more used. Software again, mostly local, still kind of moving towards the cloud workflows. So yeah, some of the browser-based apps coming in, still fairly limited business software available, so maybe not as widely adopted as we would like. But MDM capabilities are looking a little bit better. So we've got an MDM server on the network, we've got agents running, we've got APNS pushing all sorts of things, and larger deployments are now actually feasible thanks to all these extra tools that we've got available to us. The Mac itself able to access all sorts of things. And one thing I think really pushed was Firewire. That's probably what got Disney and these other larger kind of media companies interested in the first place, because they were able to work much quicker with more effectively with large kind of video imaging files, etc., etc. Made a huge difference. And in terms of the businesses that we're using, well, it's kind of moved out more towards education, marketing, design, music, and I put VIPs in there because about the time that your director or your VP of whatever would have a Mac at home and suddenly want one in the office or an iPad, and it was a headache to get that in place. But yeah, and the business required sites require dedicated kind of MDM engineers, which is where people like ourselves go. And in terms of a rollout, well, now we can do hundreds of devices, which is great. But yeah, we've got to configure the network, which is less great. Lots of issues there. We've got to deploy a local MDM server. We've got to create images, got to package the software, create MDM profiles, and then deploy. It sounds fairly simple when you put it in those terms. There's a lot of work that goes into that. I did a 10K MacBook rollout across the UK for like a major broadcaster about probably almost exactly 10 years ago. We filled 2 TV studios full of MacBooks. We had like about 100 workbenches, switches, USB drives, netboot, everything. Absolute chaos. And it took 3 months to get 10,000 MacBooks out into, well, across the UK. And yeah, even the MDM configuration itself took a considerable time. And yeah, lots of custom scripting. Every time a new OS would release, something would break. And even point releases, and you'd have to kind of start again. Obviously, through those 3 months, we had point releases. I think had a major release, which actually broke everything. So we had to almost start again. So that was good fun. But yeah, the demand for Apple devices really kind of gone through the roof, and that drove forward the development of MDM and the kind of supporting tools. So more and more of these third-party tools kept appearing. I'd imagine you're all familiar, but that says what it is. But this one, the other one, it's definitely fine, actually. But yeah, so the community are really driving forward, and software vendors, but Apple left so up until the holy trinity of deploying apps, I suppose. So yeah, suddenly we've got, with advances with, I think we're at macOS at this point as opposed to OS X, operating systems deployable over the internet. Great, instead of having to do it via imaging or CD. We've got Apple Business Manager, so the device enrollment program, meaning we don't need Deploy Studio particularly anymore, which everyone breathed a sigh of relief at that point. And we've got devices being associated with MDMs automatically. We've got VPP helping with the software rollouts, and APNS becoming more reliable over time. And suddenly we have zero-touch deployment as a concept. So basically Apple has started to bring in all of the tools that we need out of the hands of kind of third parties in-house. And this is what a device rollout looks like about 3 years ago. So about 3 years ago, well, this is when COVID hit, right? That's why I mentioned it. So a week before the first lockdown, I was head of workplace tech at Starling Bank, and we decided to go to a full remote approach to work because there was talk of the lockdown coming, and so okay, what do we do? Full remote, fine. We had about 200, 250 desktop users at the time. We already had an MDM in place. We had a zero-touch workflow in place, which myself, my colleague Chris, and this man here, Daz Wallace, had helped put together. You did run around Okta and integrating it into our kind of onboarding workflow, which is very useful, it turned out. But yeah, so utilizing the holy trinity of FDM, DP, VPP, few of the custom scripts, and with our logistics partner. So basically all I had to do was make one call, say we need 250 max shipped to this spreadsheet of users, and then I sat back and relaxed. Done. Overnight, like it was literally 24 hours later, everyone up and running. There's, thanks to DP, thanks to everything else. We were just ready to go, right? We've got antivirus, we've got encrypted devices, we've got endpoint security, we've got everything that we need. Imagine if COVID had hit 10, 20 years ago. Just impossible to have done that within even, a month, let alone instantaneously. And that leads me to today. Someone mentioned earlier that they're still using mobile profiles. Maybe we try and move away from that. Software-wise, yeah, like everything's kind of OS agnostic at this point. So there's a lot of, in fact, almost entirely browser-based workflows. And it doesn't have to be Internet Explorer. Good times, more Edge. MDM capabilities through the roof, as you sort of saw in the last talk, and you see a little bit later on. We've got cloud-based servers, those are on site. Great, so we don't need to be on a local network or a VPN to actually see our MDM server. Some even agentless MDMs. We've got Apple's MDM specific framework, zero-touch deployment, as I mentioned, and automated software and OS patching. Awesome. Get everything, do everything on the cloud. Business requirements, well, everyone wants a Mac these days, right? You can employee choice. Vast majority of people go down the Apple route for good reason. And yeah, the software side do quite a bit of a heavy lift for you, which is nice. So in terms of kind of trends at the moment, or where we may be going, throughout Apple, I'm trying to bring, or have been trying to bring, as much of that process that I mentioned that started sort of 20 years ago, 10 years ago, kind of in-house. So we've got the MDM command framework, we've got DDM, we've got all sorts of bits that we just didn't have before. Complexity-wise, it's an odd one because it started off as a not particularly complex process. It was, like I said, you just sat down, you set your Mac up, you maybe enrolled it in something and after that. Well, then it got real complex about 5 to 10 years ago, because we maybe didn't have some of the tools that I mentioned, like BPPs, DEPs, etc. And now we're trending back down to kind of a less complex for the engineer, which is good. So yeah, less engineering time, less knowledge even probably required to achieve kind of results now than maybe 10 years ago. Apple training towards security, we always know that, that's what they do. Autonomous devices, again, leads into that the last talk. The devices are becoming, in charge of their own destiny a little bit more than being forced to kind of check in every X amount of time. And one thing that I've seen a lot recently is MDM as a service. This is cross-platform, right? We've got, such a powerful set of tools to manage these devices now. It's simple enough for companies to come out and say, right, here you go, have a device, we'll manage it for you, we'll do everything for you. And that's that. So there's more options now for, any use case you happen to exist in. So, yeah, in summary, MDM's gone from nothing to kind of essential business tool over those last 20 years, right? I can't imagine there's anyone in here whose business does not use an MDM. No. It's just a thing we all have. I personally have gone from sort of struggling to deploy 20 Macs over a week to deploying thousands kind of zero touch over the last few years in an instant. And yeah. So what's next? to borrow your phrase from a minute. We're in, it's exciting times, it's uncertain times. I always try and give some sort of advice at the end of the talks. And considering like the ever-changing IT landscape, got AI coming in and all sorts of other technologies, find myself kind of reassessing what my focus should be. It's like an IT leader. And we all know, IT is wildly underappreciated across, well, every vertical, honestly. So I'm constantly having to prove my worth. So I guess my advice is do whatever you can to bring the most value to where you work. We've got more power as IT teams now than ever before, right? We've got MDM, we've got IDP in a lot of cases, we've got this vast array of SaaS tools and all sorts of other pieces. We can save time, we can save money, we can improve people's day-to-day and how everyone else works. So yeah, we've got all these tools now that's maybe saved us a little bit of time. Some people see that as maybe a threat, right? Maybe it's being outsourced, et cetera. Well, maybe you find a way to make the most out of that time, right? And give it back to people around the business. So why not notify your security team on Slack about unencrypted devices, right? Help them. Or your people team, notifications about someone's logged onto the desktop, a new starter, hit their desktop for the first time. Awesome, they're up and running, great. Or engineers, there's a new IDE update available, or anything useful like that. So it doesn't seem like much, but I think it makes quite a big difference to people's lives. We have the power to really change how people experience their work day to day. Anyway, that is everything from me, and thank you very much.
Any questions, comments, thoughts? Well, workgroup manager.
I'll take it. Never, once, always, and often.
Right, I think that's me then. Thank you very much.
Let's talk about that. So it's up and we'll kick off. Yeah, thanks for having me. If I completely butcher this, I'm sorry. It's my first time speaking in public, so please be nice. Thank you. Yeah, so that's me. Hopefully I look a bit like the picture. My name is Martijn. It's a Dutch name. Any English speaking people will just call me Martin. It's easier. I'm currently the CISO at Trams. It's a fairly new role to me since June. Prior to that, I was in the technical consultancy team. That is where you can find me, where you can reach me. And I was going to talk about labs. I'm sure you all know labs. Labs is a solution to automatically set and randomize passwords on devices. I think it was originally made up by Microsoft, but there's like a lot of solutions there now. Working for Trams, it's an MSP company, so we look after a lot of MDM instances. Both Jamf, Kandji as well. When we saw people migrating to Kandji, one of the first questions we got is, can we have labs? Yes, I guess. We didn't really look at it, but from Jamf, we were used to working with extension attributes, smart groups. It wasn't there. So looking at the question, I started to have a play a bit at what can we do? What can we actually make to at least offer our clients a lab solution on Kandji as well? I've set myself a couple of requirements for that solution. I don't want to store credentials in plain text anywhere. Once the randomized password is requested by either someone from service desk, user itself, I want it to automatically be rotated after a specific
time again. Also, one of the questions was, okay, can we randomize the password at least once every month? And if a device, an end user device is completely offline, I still want to have a way to get the password, because it might be that the user needs the password to actually get the device back online. So working on that, I started playing in Kandji, and what I found is creating a blueprint in Kandji where you enroll your device into. Basically, I needed two specific settings to set. First of all, I want to create a local user account that will actually be the administrator on the device. So in your blueprint, you create a user account, you set it as administrator. And another setting is to demote all other accounts to standard accounts. So the devices will end up with only one admin account. Then next to that, so previous were settings that are standard in Kandji. I created how do you call it, custom script library item in order to actually create the functionality that I need. A fun thing that I found in Kandji is that you can't just do it with one script. You need an audit script and you need a remediation script. In my case, so I created both scripts and I scheduled it to run on every device every 15 minutes. As you can see, this is just a screenshot from Kandji. I don't know if it's still or if it's for all users, but the moment you go into your custom item, it shows the first 14 lines of the script. I don't necessarily like that, so I just put a big comment block. Someone who doesn't have access to edit the script should also not be able to see what is in there, because normally I store my variables and such on top. I don't necessarily want people to see that, so that's why there's like big comment blocks in there. The audit script itself, it's a fairly short script. My solution is based on a node that's being set on the device record in Kandji. So the audit script will basically do an API call to Kandji to actually check if there is a node on the device, if it can see a node. If there's no node, it immediately exits with a code that is not zero. So the moment the script exits with an exit code that isn't zero, it will start the remediation script. Let's see, if the audit script does find a node, it will check if the node actually has the encrypted details we need in order to figure out what the password is. So it will check for the structure of the node. The nodes I create are always the same. It's 3 lines, one with encrypted secret, or one with encrypted password, one with the secret, and one with the epoch time that I want to renew the password at. If it doesn't see that structure, again, it fails with an exit code of not zero, and the remediation script kicks in. And lastly, if the audit script sees that everything's there, so it sees the correct structure in the node, but it then sees that the epoch time on the node is actually in the past, it will exit again with a code of not zero, so it kicks off the remediation script. Is everything in order? It just exits with 0, and 50 minutes later, it tries it all again until something actually needs to be rotated. The remediation script, it does a couple of things. First of all, it needs a couple of variables. Of course, it needs the details to actually connect to Kandji. So a key, a URL, in our case, a Slack webhook as well, because we want to be notified when a password is rotated or when anything changes with the password. We, of course, need to know what the admin account on the device actually is. And if, so when we create a local account, we set it with a known password. So we put that in the script as well. So if the script itself doesn't see a node or doesn't know what the encrypted password is, it will try the known password first. We set the password length. So what do we want length of the password to be when it's rotated? Do we want special characters or not? And how many days until the password is automatically rotated if it isn't requested? So those are the variables. What we do in the script, the first thing is we pull all the users from the device from Kandji, and we check if the local admin account actually exists. At the moment, if it doesn't exist, it fails the script. That is definitely something on the what's next. Ideally, if it can't find the account, it should create the local admin account, set the default password, and then it can continue. This script again, it checks the node to see if there is a node, if it has the encrypted details, it will decrypt it, and it will verify if the password is actually correct. If it isn't, again, at the moment the script fails, nothing happens. But you get an error in Kandji, and you know that something is wrong, and you need to have a look at it at some point, ideally fairly quickly. If the password is correct, we use the old credentials that it got from the system to basically we randomize a new password. We use the old credentials to set a new password on the account, and so we create a new secret and we create a new password. We use the secret then to encrypt the password again, and we verify that the password actually works once we set it. If it works, we remove the keychain because it doesn't work anymore for the user anyway. So we just get rid of it. And we create a new node that we push into Kandji. And an important one for us, because we want to know what is happening, we send that notification to Slack. Okay, the device with this serial number has its password rotated. And if nothing changes, the next renewal will be in 30 days time. How does it look in Kandji? Basically this. On the device space, you just have a node with the password, the secret, and NR is basically the epoch time for when the password should expire. That is all cool and well. It's really awesome that we have it. But what do we do to actually retrieve the password? There is another script you can either run from self-service, you can have it on an admin device, whatever. The script uses that notify, script dialog to present a screen to the user who's actually requesting the password. What we need a serial number for the device, we need a password for, and we need a reason why the password is requested. If the serial number is incorrect and you click on continue, it will tell you, okay, we don't have this serial number. Try again and again and again until you have tried enough and you can just quit it. If it actually works, so both fields are mandatory, so you can't get the password without giving a reason. The moment both fields are filled and the serial number is correct, you get a pop-up, okay, so the password for this device, that is the actual password. It will tell, the request is logged, and we change the node in the backend. We change the epoch time to, in this case, we add 60 minutes to it. That means that the moment the audit script runs again, it runs every 50 minutes in our case. The moment it runs again, it sees that epoch time has passed. It will then renew the password automatically. So with a bit of bad luck, after 1 hour and 14 minutes, the password will be rotated again. And of course, the most important thing, we want a notification that the password has actually been requested. By who? So it just pulls the username from the system in this case. And what is the reason for it? It is then up to your team to keep an eye on it. Is there a user that's requested lots of passwords for random reasons? Maybe it's time to have a chat with a user and ask, why? What are you doing? So what's next? Basically, it's a quick version of what I created. It works, but there's a lot of fine tuning we can do. What I said, if the user doesn't exist, it would be ideal if the script can actually create a local admin account there, and then if the password doesn't work, or if the encrypted password doesn't work, it would be nice if the script itself can actually reset the password there to a known password, and then can continue the whole workflow to actually make sure that all the passwords are randomized on the devices. There might be tons of other things, that we can add to make it nice. For now, it is basic. It does what it needs to do, but yeah, there's always room for improvement. Yeah, so that was basically it. What I've created. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has questions so far or not. Otherwise,
What are some of the reasons that people are putting in for requesting the admin password?
I mainly see, one username password for install is testing, but that might be my username. It can be anything. We had questions from users where one of their end users was in a hotel and the user couldn't connect to Wi-Fi anymore. So the end user needed an admin password to remove the wireless network from the known networks in order to get the captive portal again. And that's the reason why I wanted to work, or I want to be able to get the password while the end user device is actually offline. But that's why we store everything in Kandji in this case. But yeah, it basically can be anything where a user needs elevated permissions. That can be the reason.
Do you have any auditing of things that they do when they are up?
Not at the moment. That is definitely something that would be nice to have. I think that is a version somewhere up the road. But yeah, it would be really nice to actually capture what is happening on the device in the time that the user has admin permission.
So I'm thinking about things like Cyber Essentials as well, which is a framework, in the UK.
Yeah.
There's the expectation you're not running as administrator all the time, and there are loads of different ways around it. And I've probably said too much. All right.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I also think this is not something that should be used, every day just because it's easy. I think it should be used as a last resort to actually get access and get your user back online. And then when the user is back online, you can do a remote session. You can figure out what's actually wrong. And you can even trigger the renewal of the password yourself. Yeah, I would use it as a last resort to actually help the user get the user back online.
Do you see a future where you don't need a local admin?
Hopefully, yes. If you do it with so if your users are connected to any IDP and you can just use the groups from IDP, you can potentially create the user as admin there. But then again, if the device is offline and the device can't actually reach your IDP, how do you make that change?
Do you have any login for what the users use the admin credential section for?
No. Not at the moment. It is definitely something for the future that we just grab, everything that has changed from the moment the password is requested until the password is renewed again. But yeah, that's definitely future.
You worry about security issues or not?
Not in this case. The user I've created, I don't think it even has a secure token, but we don't use that user account to log into the device. We just use it to elevate permissions while the normal user account is already logged in. So if the normal user account needs to do an action where it needs admin permissions, that is what we can use this.
I guess you have recovery keys for that anyway, right?
Yeah, we have the recovery keys in Kandji. You can just pull it out if the user actually can't log in. But yeah, that's not where I was looking for with this. Cool. Any more? Yes.
So what would happen if someone was to log out of the device with their account and then log in with those set of credentials?
In theory, your device is encrypted with file vault. The user doesn't have a secure token, so the admin account can't log in. The admin account doesn't have permission to actually unlock or decrypt the device.
If they just log out and then just log in, they could log into to that administrator session.
Possibly, I haven't tested that, to be honest.
The parameter that you've got should deny that to standards in this next. If that scenario happened, if they logged in.
Well, it's excluded access to.
Excluded the admin promotion.
Since the home device that Dev knows, they could log anyway, because it would just put it back.
Yeah. Potentially, I haven't looked at it that far.
Maybe
Yeah,
it's a good thing for what's next, some more authentication in front of it, so that you have to be a member of the IT team to leverage it, or.
Yes, but how will you check that if the device is actually offline, how will you check that? You know, how I start looking at this is the device is completely offline. So, you know, no IDP, nothing, you know, you can't do an API call from the device itself. There's nothing you can do from the device. You need to get your device online. And that is where this, in theory, should work.
I mean, obviously you use this in conjunction with policies. So do you have a policy like if someone gives you a reason, do you reject it? Or
At the moment, the reason is just being logged. It's not in Slack. It's not being set to actually allow. It's just pure there to create an audit trail of, okay, the password has been requested at this time for this device with this reason. If you do a complete phony reason in there, it will still work. But I think it would warrant, you know, a quick chat with the user who actually put the reason in. The retrieval script, the script that actually that is used to request a password for a device. I would scope it to, you know, potentially a service desk team, maybe, you know, second, third line. I wouldn't give the whole company access to that, because that completely defeats the purpose of, you know, not having admin accounts on your device.
I'm not as familiar with Kandji, but you said that the password gets put in the notes in Kandji, right?
Yes.
So if the admin user is the old person in this case, was documents just going to the notes in Kandji rather than going through the dialog box to get that reason and stuff?
So it's not that the actual password is stored in a node. It's an encrypted version of the password. So the encrypted password is there. Yes, it has the secret as well to decrypt it. But then, you know, you need to decipher, you need to know how it's actually encrypted. So if you got a lot of time and you really want to, you can just play with it and figure out if you can actually get the password. But yeah, we don't store the actual password anywhere.
following off of that question, you can always change the file, so it's not really compliant with reserve, they're not really.
In theory, anyone with access to Kandji can change the file. But I've seen the moment you change it or even delete the node, it still shows up in your activity. So there's always a way to find out what the encrypted password was and the secret. But that is also where I said, you know, in the what's next, it would be good if there is no node and none of the passwords actually work, that it would be good that you would be able to set, you know, the standard password again, and that it would use the audit script to randomize that at the next check-in.
Sorry, when you mentioned the password encrypted and the secret as well, I'm going to assume that you're using OpenSSH to do encryption. One thing we found is maybe the way that we did it was, I think, the best, but we found that going between it was Ventura and Monterey changed the version of LibreSSL that was used. So if you have encrypted stuff in a specific way, it will give you a different key depending on which OS you're on. So all your scripts are then valid at a certain point, make qualifiers. There's better ways, there's very specific ways you can use OpenSSH to encrypt stuff properly. I'm not saying we didn't do it that way, but there's, that's one to, you can get it all out on that very easily. So
yeah, I definitely wasn't aware of that. Yeah. It's good to test. I've tested it on Ventura for now. There it seems to do the trick. I haven't tested it on any of the older or on Sonoma just yet.
Yeah, like as a debugging thing, I'd always do like OpenSSH version. I think if it's not, then now it's not 336.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good point. It's definitely something I can have a look at, you know, to build in to check what what SSL version is actually used to encrypt the password. And if that doesn't match with the SSL version running on the system, that it should stop. Yeah, no, it's a good one. Yeah, I haven't thought of it before. Yeah. Cool.
What measures have you got in place to protect the API?
Nothing in here. So we create an API key with the minimum necessary authorizations. So the API key has access to actually view the device details, create a node, delete a node, but we kept it as minimum as possible. Cool. Anything else?
Right, I'll try and do this one kind of short and sweet. Most of you know my mug, Daz Wallace, part of London Apple Admins Organisers. Most people know me as Daz_Wallace on Slack, Twitter, etc., etc. I don't know if anyone's heard, there's been a couple of new OSs released recently. Last week, 2 weeks or so.
Monterey's not the latest.
Monterey? What is this Monterey speaker? There was only Sonoma. No, I'm pronouncing that correct. So I'm going to cover briefly the changes that Apple announced with regards to managing devices. It will be a bit of a windstop tour, mostly because I'm going to say words I don't necessarily understand. But there will be links to the KBs that reflect these, so you can delve in more detail, perhaps be just as confused as I am in some areas, hopefully less so in others. First up, nice and easy, do iOS 17. That's the KB link. It's along the lines of what's new in managing iOS 17. I think the title was. Probably going to go there to record the title on this, but yeah, make it in. So first up, NDMs can now enable account-driven device enrollment to allow users to enroll their iOS or iPadOS device into management using their organization's managed Apple ID instead. App Configurator in iOS 17 can now automatically assign a device to the NDM server when it adds it to ABM or ASM or Apple Business Essentials. The idea being that you don't have to use this, add it to ABM, run over to ABM, assign it to NDM server, maybe wipe it, maybe wait. It just should do it automatically for that. Or it can do it automatically, I should say. Signing with Apple automatically will use the managed Apple ID if it's managed app you've pushed down, and a personal ID if it's a non-managed app. Just by default, that's the option you get, which has like sign in with Facebook, sign in with Microsoft, sign in with Google, sign in with Apple, sign in with your name next door, I don't know. All those weird options. NDMs, I love this one, can now enforce a minimum operating system version on enrollment with devices using automatic device enrollment. It does require some changes to your MDM solution, so you have to wait for your vendors to provide that, keep an eye on them. I'm pretty sure it needs the device already running macOS Sonoma. So with 14.00, not much benefit because that is the minimum OS, and if it's on before that, it's not going to understand the new key. So 14.01, 14.1, blah, 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 that should help out and be really cool, especially if you're someone like ourselves who runs minimum OS compliance. So you can ensure that users aren't going through the whole enrollment deployment process, going to log into the email account and then get rejected, log a ticket, then have to do an upgrade or an update. It's a much smoother process. Declarative Device Management, DDM, can now be used to manage updates in iOS and iPadOS. That will come up again in a different OS, as you may have heard today as well. And something I didn't mention last time I did one of these, iOS now provides support for private data-only cellular networks using LTE, 5G, non-standard and standalone. Essentially, if you're one of those fancy people who run your own 5G network, iOS now supports it. There's more. So exciting. With return to service, NDM can now send an erase command, including the Wi-Fi details and an optional NDM enrollment profile. So the theory being, you can erase a device and automatically it will connect to a Wi-Fi network, enroll to an NDM server, all the way to the home screen ready to be used. Great, if you've got like a kiosk device, it's true zero touch. That's probably the closest you're ever going to get to complete and utter zero touch. okay, you have to press, it has to be enrolled before and you have to press erase device. But, you know, once you've erased it, previously you'd have to at least click continue once or twice. New declarations support the deployment of certificates and identities using ACME, SCEP, or a encrypted PKS12 container and certificates as .pem or .dr encoded files. No, I will not repeat that. No, I will not explain it because I don't fully understand it. But for those that do, those that ears will prick up when you hear that, it'll be great news. Certificates from self-signed certificate authorities are automatically added to the device's trusted root certificates. Another helpful one, didn't quite, I maybe I've not come across a scenario where that's an issue, but sounds helpful. Kind of thought we already did it. Maybe I'm mistaken. This is quite a cool one. So devices enrolled with user enrollment, i.e. not automatic device enrollment, you don't own the device, it's the user's device, kind of BYD. They can now be configured to disallow auto lock from being set to never. The idea being that, okay, you've allowed your BYD stuff, users bring their own mobile devices in, they don't want it to auto lock, you know, they're too busy to unlock a device, they're too busy to look at it, you know, they just want to be there. You can say, actually, you've got our emails on there, you've got access to our data. You have to have something, please. An MDM can now report on the battery health of iOS devices. Hooray. It's pretty good. It's pretty good to keep an eye on those batteries. We've all heard the stories of how lithium batteries fail in very, very nice, secure and controlled ways. Definitely not flammable risk or anything like that. Hopefully stuff like this will give you a heads up, you can then search.
Is that like normal or service, or is that like sign?
I don't know details, but yes, I'd imagine that's the same thing you would see as a user. You would see like, okay,
Normal. Go away.
it's service, I'm on fire, why are you reading this? Sorry, another section here is the bug fixes and other improvements, kind of miscellaneous. Cancelled exchange events no longer remain on calendar. I'm assuming this is the built-in calendar app. It had been deleted elsewhere. I don't know if that's a new bug or not, but that seems quite a weird one. Anyway, this one is verbatim. Devices respond to MDM more reliably. Is that bad news? Well, actually, it's great news, don't get me wrong, but a little bit more meat there would be helpful. But yeah, if it's more reliable, I'm happy. Apple devices now support connections to 802.1x networks using eTLS with TLS 1.3. It's that last bit, that's the new thing on that one. With network relay, a secure HTTP 3 or 2 relay can be configured to proxy all TCP and UDP traffic. I'm not chucking a sorry, James, for fans of podcasts, but unfortunately it's me that be editing this. And lastly, iOS and iPadOS devices support configuring 802.1x over Ethernet. So I think I talked about this last time I did one of these, but essentially you have a weird hodgepodge of like connectors and adapters and power adapters, and essentially you can get an Ethernet cable to work with an iOS device. Now you can also push out radius if your network requires. Right, iPadOS 17. This one's really long, so be ready. That's easy. There was a few gotchas, and I'm glad I did actually sit here and read this. So if you're using shared iPads, there's a very important note here saying, please refer to this other KD, upgrading your shared iPadOS 17, sorry, for important information regarding the upgrading process. The TLDR is, if you have existing user accounts on this shared iPad, don't try and upgrade it to iPadOS 17, because you're going to have issues. The workaround, now this might well be something that will get better at a later time, but bear in mind, if you're doing this, the workaround is to use MDM to trash the local accounts. In theory, they should just be caches anyway on that device, so they should be treated as volatile anyway. But make sure you delete those users, then push out the upgrade. But if you're in this sort of environment where you're using shared iPad, please read that KB yourself, understand it, do some testing. Too far. Last few on shared iPad enhancements. So one cool thing is iPadOS 17 allows the MDM solution to fully configure a shared iPad for a particular user after they sign in. Essentially, user signs in, they kind of get held at a little state while user-specific things are chucked in. Because what could have potentially happened is user signs in, they get dumped on the home screen. There's no apps. Oh wait, there's one. Oh, there's another one. Oh, it's not a great user experience, especially if you are perhaps deploying different sets of apps and settings depending on which user's logging in. So it's quite a nice thing. I think it's similar to what you get with macOS, where it sits you at the MDM enrollment screen until it then lets you proceed. And in iPadOS 17, you can skip setup using this new skip language and locale setup for new users option. Essentially, it tells the device to just use the iPadOS's system settings for that user, things like location, region, etc., etc. It's one of those things where it's like, you can imagine a user getting annoyed every time they log into a fresh iPad, they have to go, yes, I want this, yes, I want that. You can just skip all that. Makes it nice and easy, especially if you're in education, perhaps with younger children in education. There's less distractions, you know, they don't need more distractions, they can find distractions with a piece of paper. You work less than a quick and get on the class. And temporary session. So I like to call this kind of guest users, because in macOS it was the same thing where you have a guest account where it trashes you and log out. You were never there kind of thing. Great for kiosks. Some universities used it as a way of just having minimal like storage constraints on their macOS devices. So with shared iPad, you could do that for, I think the last was iPadOS 16. Now iPadOS 17 will honour the quota size for a temporary user. So you can't just fill up the whole iPad with, I don't know, carriage pound recordings. Cool. Bug fixes and improvements, surprise, surprise, same as iOS 17. So listen to me ramble earlier. Right, on to the new macOS Sonoma. Again, I probably butchered that pronunciation. English is my first language. I know it's a great surprise to me how I ramble, but I think it's Sonoma. I'm pretty sure it's Sonoma. Gonna again reel through these. So already mentioned today, MDM can enforce software updates by certain dates and times. Can get users additional information, system settings, when an update is required, and when it's going to be when it's requested by the MDM and when it's required. Automatic device enrollment can be enforced after set up the system. Previously, it'd be a little notification that pop in if you managed to skip the automatic device enrollment, and you could just kind of keep ignoring it. I'm going to jump around because they had it in a weird order on theirs, but the notification that requests the user enrolls in MDM is now replaced with a full screen setup assistant experience using automatic device enrollment. So it's not this stupid little notification that you can just stick a post-it note of that corner in, out of mind, outside out of mind. It's actually a full in your face, like nudge on aggressive mode, you know, it's there, you're not going to mistake it, hopefully. MDM can enable account-driven user enrollment and account-driven device enrollment to allow users to enroll their Mac using their organizational ID in system settings. Profile-based user enrollment is deprecated and will be removed in future release. So this isn't something I honestly have had recent experience with, but my interpretation is that using a profile manually to do a user enrollment is deprecated. It's gone, it's dead, it's buried, doesn't exist anymore. But if you're using managed app IDs and that kind of system, you can kind of force users in. Now, I might have completely got that wrong. Admittedly, I say, I love ADE. I will use automatic device enrollment every day over anything else. So feel free to correct me at the end when I have inevitably butchered it. There's some new features in platform single sign-on. I believe Microsoft have what's still in the, it's not beta, it's kind of, it's a step up from beta, but a step below public release. It's like a public beta maybe, but they've got something you can play with the platform SSO. I believe a few other vendors are almost there, if not there as well. But there is on Slack the platform SSO channel, if something that interests you, and you're just, you know, maybe it's something that will benefit your organization. Jump in that channel, have a little poke around, ask a few questions. The people in there are friendly, and they'll try and help. There's been some enhancements to password requirement enforcement. So doesn't have to wait for you to do a full login before it will kind of evaluate when you push down a profile. It's a lot quicker. It will happen during the session at some stage. Personally, it's not that's a feature I use, so I don't have much experience. That's my understanding, and the process should be a lot better. MDM can granularly restrict more individual settings in the system settings app. So no more blanket off or on. You get much more granular, you can be much more surgical, rather than getting the big hammer out and just smashing half the stuff out of the way for the user, which, you know, if you don't need to do it, why do it? You create more work, you create more aggro for your users. There's no benefit to it. And this will hopefully help you be kinder to your users. MDM can require admin users, and it doesn't specifically say admin users, to turn on firewall during setup of the system. I did have a discussion with a few folks earlier today. Apparently, for this to work, you need to allow the option to see the firewall setup system screen. So, and again, I might be wrong with this, but my understanding, at least for that discussion, is that you have to give the user the option to say, yes, I want firewall turned on, to be able to enforce firewall turning on. Otherwise, it just skips past it. If you're using other solutions, again, token personal experience here, other products available. Jamf Connect has a key that can turn firewall on as part of the initial login. In macOS, there is a profile key that I think allows you to set a similar thing, but it requires that first login, which if you're going through setup system to desktop without any login window replacement, it might skip that. There's a few scenarios where this proves quite useful. Essentially, Apple are trying to make sure that you're happy your device is encrypted before you start snapping on all your corporate secrets and access. Promise you, nearly there. 4 more slides there. macOS now supports managed device attestation, yes. I promise you, I'm not like second language English, I'm just terrible. Declarative Device Management can now manage a set of configurations for some built-in services. One of these includes the ability to use Touch ID for sudo, and that will stay in place after an upgrade or an update. Previously, you could edit a file, and essentially whenever terminal requires you to elevate, you can use your Touch ID, nice and easy. As soon as you slap an update on there, it's wiped out. There is a way of doing this now, and there is more documentation from Apple, suggest looking at it if it's of interest to you folks. Or you just check the next slide, which I've neglected to remember. We'll come back to that. New declarations support deployment of certificates and identities. So essentially, you can use that channel to push down certificates, push down identities to your devices. A new built-in network relay supports secure and transparent tunneling of traffic as an alternative to VPN when accessing internal resources. Again, it's on my to-do list to read that because we do have like a Beyond Corp style solution from where I work. And, you know, if you can stick native, why not? You know, it's more likely to work through updates and upgrades rather than relying on third parties. So that's something that is of interest to me personally. MDM can now set the order in which transparent proxy extensions handle network traffic. So if you're running one of the latest OSs, you'll see that you have to push down profiles to allow like network extensions, things like that, for your proxies and or VPNs. There's some people out there who maybe have multiple deployed to the same device. Personally, don't know why. Maybe I'm just very lucky to not have to experience that. But there's now a new MDM command that controls where you can sort of set the priority order of how it sort of rotates through. Again, thankfully, I'm very innocent in that area. I'm very naive, and it's not something I've had to deal with, actually. But again, if any of you have, we'd love to hear it. We'll have a session next time we do one of these to talk about it, if you're interested. macOS now supports the creation of hardware-bound private keys for certificates issued using the ACME protocol. That's the thing that uses the device assertion with the T2 to kind of it's a lot of cryptographic stuff that goes on there, not cryptographic. To deal with the hardware device, secure enclave, and kind of it's another one of those things that ensures that the device is a device and not someone spoofing a VM to try and pull secrets, that kind of stuff. It's just another layer of protection for these keys that maybe stops these certificates and these keys being taken off that device and put onto something else, a completely different device, a weird sort of drive-by Linux machine, that kind of thing. You know, stuff that attackers might use to try and get into secure networks that are likely to want this kind of stuff. Just an extra layer on top. Screen share capabilities. These are now improved to Mac computers with Apple Silicon, or ARM, as they're more known in some places, over high bandwidth connections. Again, it's not something I've used, and it's not something that's used a lot outside of perhaps big corporations who require an on-site presence or education, purely because screen sharing is a local thing. It's not really intended for, you know, me to remote to my user's house across the world. It's not really designed for that. As a result, my get out of jail free card is, I haven't used it. It sounds cool, not for me. Unfortunately, I can't provide any other advice or recommendations. But again, if you've used it, if you like it, feel free to come up here and show us how cool it is. Yeah, promise. Bug fixes and improvements. Again, Apple devices now support 802.1x using EAP TLS with TLS version 1.3, same as your iOS. Finder can now be used to revive or restore a USB connected DFU Mac. So you don't have to have Apple configurator. Maybe it's a potential death knell for Apple configurator, maybe not. But you know, one less requirement for your techs to have another app pushed out before they can just get the user over remote. Got Apple setup done. Hands up if you've used this trick in the past. That was a very fast hands up. Not no more. Not no more. If a local user already exists on the Mac and you delete that file, it doesn't care. To be fair, you know, there was people who, if you had an encrypted device, you boot it into the single user mode. You get the command prompts, and you can delete a file, and then it's a way of getting into a device that isn't particularly healthy or good, especially for someone who isn't authorized to be getting into said device. Apple's suggestion here, which I don't disagree with, but erase all content settings to reset the device, get it back to setup system, and try and do it correctly. This one caught me out, and it also caught out the MDM provider we use because they use it as part of their restricted software. The audit subsystem is disabled by default in Sonoma and is marked as deprecated. See Audit D manual page for more details. It can be turned back on, and that was the current workaround for this. If you're finding your MDM vendor or your management vendor of choice uses this for something, and it's something you need, a feature you need, I would suggest reaching out to account managers, just gently say, hey, this is now deprecated. Is this on your radar? Please tell me it's on your radar. Because, you know, maybe it'll stick around like LaunchD for Dodd use. Maybe it will go tomorrow. Who knows? If it's deprecated, regard it as, if you can, regard it as gone. If you can't, really start looking into what else you can do to kind of work around that. Touch ID can be allowed with pseudo configuration that persists across software updates using etc pan.d/sudo_local. There is a sudo_local.template file in that location with details, but it's really easy. You just copy it and you uncomment a line. That's another way of doing it. Have a play. I think it's supposed not had any problems. I'm not seeing any issues reported. Again, that will provide a working solution past updates and presumably past upgrades when macOS 18.24, whatever comes out. And again, resolve an issue with Exchange events not syncing Kandji. For some users, it explicitly says for some users. You could say it's because only some users have been affected. Maybe it only fixes it, but the likelihood is it fixes it for the people that experience it. Right, deferrals. So, as some of you are aware, as of the last OS, these upgrades come down as part of the software update UI, software update user experience, the software update lack of administration rights required. Personally, I have liked this because it's made my job a million times easier. No Yankee scripts, no having to deploy a whole app from my CDN or doing some other command line tools to put it down. There's a whole lot of faff that's just gone out of my life. Which I like. I've got enough faff to deal with. So just to bear in mind, as a result, users will see this as of a couple of days ago. Heads up. Sorry, it's a bit late. But users will start to see this appear. And they'll be able to click upgrade now. And I'll be putting for their credentials to do with, Steele volumes, secure tokens, all that jazz. And it will chug along, it'll restart, and as long as nothing's gone wrong, they'll be upgraded. Awesome. Bit of a problem if you haven't had a chance to test yet. A bit of a problem if you have known issues with your software stack. Now, I'm going to make a lot of enemies here. I am in the camp of when betas come out, people need to test the bejeebs out of them. You find issues, you go to your vendors, you go to the Apple feedback, you log in, get it in there. Getting early, it's more likely to be sorted by the time release comes out. And that will hopefully get around those issues. As a personal point of pride, we've been able to manage A1 support with a load of, I don't want to avoid swearing, but security tools. And a lot of last minute deployment blockers that were lifted the week of RC1. And we could offer our users. And that less than 24 hours, we were like, go nuts, how about it? And apparently, much like myself, our users have no lives. Within 2 or 3 hours, we had a good 10% of our users already on. So far, I've had one user report an issue that once they upgraded, Spotify stopped playing music. We did correct them that was completely unrelated to the upgrade. And we'd be quite surprised that wasn't the case. It was an issue with our filtering on that one. Yeah, so I would personally prefer option 1. I know I am preaching the desired state. I know none of you folks want to, be behind on these kind of things or not be able to offer these kind of things. And being realistic, if you could, you would. If you can't, you can't. There's no getting around that. So your second option here is to defer those updates. Now, deferral is a maximum of 90 days. Damn it, I spoiled the punchline, but I was going to say, so release was on the 26th, not the 25th of September. 90 days from that is roughly quite a large holiday in a few countries, just a handful of countries. Obviously, I'm talking about New Year's. It's the week before New Year's Day, so you're going to be a bit more chilled out. No, of course, it's 25th of December. So I don't like being called out of hours. I've got better things to do. I know it's a shock to a lot of people. The last thing I want is a phone call on 25th of December from my CEO, CIO, saying my Mac's upgraded itself and our Spotify doesn't work. Just to be aware of that. So my suggestion would be defer if you need to. You can bump the deferral further out if you need to. Don't forget, the deferral is based on the release date from Apple. It's not based on when the device sees the update, when you push an update, the configuration out, all that kind of jazz. And if you need to, take this to your bosses and say, we want to run Macs, we need to keep up to date, if nothing else, security reasons. I need time. My team needs time to work on this. One thing I might do in a future session is myself and my colleague, Ewan Collier, built out a full testing workflow. And whenever there's an Apple release, maybe not the beta releases, because, well, I've got other work to do, but whenever there's a release, the first thing I do, duplicate my project plan with those steps, those things to test, update it for next OS, work through. And I'm not working for everything, I'm not going to Outlook and do email invites, this and that. It's really basic tests, can I log into email client? Can I send an email? Great, next thing. Safari is open, can I have a web page? Great. Can I have a blocked web page? No, great. Filters web, great, next one. Boom, 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 boom. Just the real basic stuff that you're gonna get a phone call, if you're not, but you might get a phone call in the middle of the night to say, this is broken, get up, fix it now. So that you can go to users, yeah, great, Mac was 0 day, don't care. I tested the update yesterday, it came out the day before, get it, have it, awesome, done. Or we've got a major problem here. We have to go between this product doesn't work with this update, but there's 0 days in this that needs to be fixed. And that's in a conversation to the business to say, what's more valuable here? It's a tough call. It's not easy. And we're in that age where you need to patch often. And patching is a pain in the arse. It can be time consuming. It can be strenuous. It can be non-stop. But it's also probably the easiest single thing you can do to ensure your estate is secure. Why is a potential script kiddie or a nation state actor or whoever's going to waste time and effort on a unknown 0 day when they can just check an update you haven't installed for 3 years on a Barracuda appliance? I think that one was, probably shouldn't be saying some recording, but I think that was the case. There was an appliance where there was some patches that were released years ago, and there was a huge wave of devices that were done over, and it was fixing this patch these years ago. It was like, no one thought that we should install these patches because it's working and it's working. It's fine. I've realised I turned this into a lecture. It's not like I get loads of beers on my rant. So I'm going to shut up. If anyone was still awake and paying attention, is there any questions? I'll do my best to answer them. Go on, you go.
Do you have any other pronunciation guesses?
For macOS, no, just macOS or macOS, I guess, or iOS.
OS 10.
That might be one for a later discussion offline. And most in wind-ups, to be honest. But I mean, it's I missed Ace Ventura. That was a fun one. Made little fun logos and emojis and stuff. And then you got Sonoma, and it was like, oh, it's actually I can't do much with that. It's nice. It's a nice, good name. There's nothing suitable for work, should I say, on that one. Any other questions?
Just on return to service.
Yes.
I haven't read up on it much, but just as a question, does anyone know, or do you know, if you do send a return service with a Wi-Fi code and just as a general thing, and then the machine goes to someone's house, will it try to connect to that Wi-Fi, or will it offer you an option to go to another Wi-Fi?
I would presume it would go, oh, I've got Wi-Fi network. Wi-Fi configuration. Oh, I can't see it. Put me on something. It's been one of two scenarios. That is the one that makes sense, and I would guess would be the case. The other scenario is it just sits there and goes on. I'm doubtful that's the case. I think it would be more independent than that. It currently is anyway. So, yes, and share. Any other questions? Sweet. So, first of all, thank you so much for Kandji to hosting us and feeding us, watering us, and giving me another platform to rant. Apologies for the rant. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. It's been great having you all here. Really great topics, really great things brought up. Always very interesting and great for first-time speakers as well. See you next week. We'll see you up again. If you're interested in potentially hosting more of these with us or for us, we'd be ever so grateful. There is a rumour going around that we're probably the largest single macOS meetup group in the world.
We may have started that rumour though.
Maybe start that rumour now.
And this is how it's done.
But it's great to see so many people come out to these things. And we're trying to make them regular again. Still pick up speed after the COVID lockdowns and that kind of stuff. Yes, if you're more than willing to host us, we'd love to hear from you. We do have a form on the website as well for getting involved. And that is both hosting and speaking. Again, if you have anything you want to talk about, it doesn't have to be macOS related. It doesn't have to be iOS related. It doesn't have to be Apple related. It doesn't have to be even IT related. If you've got a really cool thing you want to share about, and you want to just share it with other people, we're more than happy to have you up here. It means you hear less of me, which is always a great thing. Less rants. And we'd like to, I think I mentioned this before, but we'd like to use this as a bit of a platform to help people get comfortable with speaking. And then we'd love to see you at conferences, both local and overseas, showing your knowledge, showing your skills. We've got great knowledge in here. We've got loads of really great skills. We're just all really quiet and Don't like to ask questions, which is great when you're a speaker. Don't get me wrong, but it'd be great to see new people up there.
There's a testimonial here. I was once, I was once a first speaker at a London Apple event, and I ended up doing conference talks. It's all still Ben Thomas' fault. So you too.
Ben Toms, I don't know if you're still watching, but mine is also your fault because I said I might be interested, and then I was on the list.
It is that simple.
But that's a great motivator, There's nothing like a deadline. They're going to push you through. You work for school, you work for some exams at work, you get given a deadline, you go, oh, I really need to do that. Oh, I don't want to do it, I need to do it. No, seriously though, it's and if you've got any ideas that you're not sure if you can make it to a full talk, please come up here, have a chat. We'll have you up here. You can test bits of it. If you want a longer slot, let us know. We can do that. If you want to have the whole slot, we can also potentially do that. It's really not a problem. We want to hear more from people. We want to hear more about what they're up to. Even if you're like, hey, I've got this, I'm stuck. Can I have help? Please, would that be great to show a bit of peer knowledge and peer kind of review on that kind of stuff. I'm going to shut up.